From the basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Vault. Jersey Joe and Big Shot Rob back in studio. You know, at the end of the day, teams that start the NFL season 0-2 have a 12% chance of making the playoffs. That is the case for the New York Giants, but clearly not their crosstown rivals, the New York Jets. Big Shot Rob, 2-0. You beat Andrew Luck in his place handily last night. Tell me right now, you look at that game, I think you walk away with so many positives. What's the biggest thing for you that you take away from last night?
The defense is just unstoppable, Joe. We kept blitzing Andrew Luck left and right. We saw what the pressure did to him. The guy was running the whole game. That was how he was gaining his yards. He couldn't throw to anybody. Darrelle Revis was shutting down the wide receivers. T.Y. Hilton struggled at times. I mean, Joe, we look at this game, though, versus the Colts. Yeah, they come out, the Jets win 20-7, but the Colts had so many missed opportunities. We look in the first half, Adam Vinatieri misses a 29-yard field goal. Frank Gore fumbles at the goal line in the second half. Big killer for them going down the stretch.
I don't think that there's any doubt about it, and that's one of the big points that people make is, well, why did Andrew Luck struggle so much last night? Now, clearly, the interceptions were not good. He wasn't afraid to go after Revis, which some people have criticized him for, which I don't know. I think you've got to be aggressive, and Andrew Luck always is aggressive. But that Jets defensive pressure on the Colts offensive line, my goodness, the Colts had no answer for that pressure that the Jets were throwing at them. I mean, Andrew Luck was constantly being hit all night, never could get in a good feel smooth for the pocket because it just collapsed so quickly. I mean, that Jets defense is just absolutely outstanding. You look at them, and then we got to shift over to the offense for a minute, Rob. When you look at this Jets offense right now, I'll be honest, it's nice to see because we haven't seen it the last couple of seasons, but everyone's getting the ball. It's being evenly distributed. I love what I'm seeing all around from the Jets right now.
Oh, most definitely. And, Joe, one thing I had to say I love the most with this wide receiver corps, Brandon Marshall, kind of reminding me of when we had Braylon Edwards, just because of the height. But the thing is, Marshall has so many more moves. He could catch the ball, and then he'll end up taking it 10, 15 yards past the defender. We saw his late touchdown late in the game where he carried two defenders into the end zone. That's what the Jets have been needing the last couple years to fill this role.
There's no question about it. Now, I mean, look, it's all good for the Jets right now. They're 2-0. You get the Eagles on Sunday. Now, right now, Rob, I think it's an understatement to say it's not looking good for the Philadelphia Eagles. It is just Kiko Alonso tore his ACL, so the player that Chip Kelly traded LaShawn McCoy away has now once again injured himself on the same injury. DeMarco Murray, to say he has done poorly is an understatement. Eli Manning has more rushing yards than him. It just seems like all of the chips, literally all the chips and pieces that Chip Kelly brought in are falling apart. Right now, the Eagles are not a team that, I mean, if I'm the Jets, they're a team I want to play. What's wrong with the Eagles?
You know what? It just goes back to the offseason, Joe, with Chip Kelly. The guy had no idea. He should not have had any control of the roster whatsoever. You know, one big thing I look at is he let go of Jeremy Maclin in the offseason. Didn't want to sign him back. Now Maclin led the Eagles not only in touchdowns, receptions, and yards. How do you let him just walk right to Kansas City? He's off to a hot start already. You can't just rely on Matthews to carry the load. Then you have your three running back set, and you're not utilizing them whatsoever. Ryan Matthews isn't being utilized right. The offensive line is just god-awful, and now you're seeing why DeMarco Murray was good with Dallas last year when he was able to eclipse over 1,000 yards.
I don't think that there's any question about it. And obviously right now, I mean, it was fun. I did a Jets report this morning with Ian Sachs, who covers the team for ESPN Radio, 104.5, the team, ESPN Albany. And he picked the Eagles to win this game. And I don't know. I was really shocked by that because, look, is this a situation where the Eagles are destined for a win? Probably, but right now, when I look at the lack of confidence that I see in that offensive line and their inability to run the football, you think you're going to run the ball against that Jets defense right now?
Oh, no, not whatsoever. There's no way to get through that defensive line. They just break through at all points, this Jets defensive line. There's no way the Eagles, if you're struggling versus Dallas's defensive line, you're nowhere close to getting past the Jets.
No, it's just not going to happen. So you're going with the Jets to win on Sunday, 3-0?
I'm going to stick with my Jets, but I do see it as the trap game.
It has the makeups to be it, but right now, I mean, I just have riding too high on that Jets defense. I just think, look, the Eagles are in a tough spot. They're struggling to throw the football, and they're certainly struggling to run the football with DeMarco Murray. If you can't do either of those things very well, you're in a lot of trouble. We move on, though, a little bit. I want to go back to Andrew Luck for a minute, Rob, because there have been a lot of people who've said, look, he just hasn't looked sharp this season. You know my thoughts on the Colts. My thoughts on the Colts have always been they are a bad football team with an outstanding quarterback. Andrew Luck is just once-in-a-generation type of talent, and he's just being bogged down and carrying this lackluster roster of the Colts. And I think right now it's being shown more than anything. Now, has he played well this season? No. But does it help with the talent he has around him? I don't think so either. But what is it? Is it luck just not playing well, or do you think it's just that Colts bad roster is just catching up?
It's the Colts roster catching up, Joe. Not only now do they not only have their bad defense, which they've had even dating back to when Peyton Manning was there, there's no line. There's no protection for Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck is a guy who stays in there. He stays in the pocket. He throws deep to his wide receivers. And you know what? Just that line collapses. He has about maybe a 3-second gap before somebody's after him. And that's the biggest killer. Your quarterbacks typically need about a 5 to 6 second gap to get the ball out. And you know what? They're just not providing that for him.
They are not. And you hit the nail on the head. That offensive line is the main crux, I think. And part of the big thing is you need to have continuity. You want to see the same faces for a long time on that offensive line. That has not been the case for the Indianapolis Colts. They've had a lot of constant change and movement, and there's no ability to build chemistry, to build fluidity on that line and help Luck. Difficult situation, but let's go now back to the crosstown rivals for the Jets. The New York Giants in the opposite boat, 0-2, dropping another heartbreaker to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons outscoring them 14-0 in the fourth quarter. The Giants held a 20-10 lead in that fourth quarter and ended up surrendering their game. So, Rob, I was there covering the game, and I think the biggest takeaway is what Tom Coughlin said. I mean, basically, our overall energy and just execution at the end of games is not good, and it's got to get better. But right now, for you, watching from the outside, what do you see as the problem with the Giants? Why can't they finish games?
I think it's just, we look at it with, first of all, you start off with their wide receivers. Odell Beckham is the only reliable receiver to catch a football due to the Victor Cruz absence of his injury. And that's the biggest killer. They don't have another wide receiver. They don't have a running game that they can't establish whatsoever because Rashad Jennings just can't put the work in. Shane Vereen's still trying to get on a roll. And Eli Manning, Joe, he's just making rookie mistakes. He's still making these boneheaded mistakes late in game. And that's what's killing them.
Look, that is definitely a big part of it right there. And it's difficult because I think when you look at this Giants team in the first two games, there are a lot of positive things you could take away from them, but they're both all undone by just that fourth quarter execution. And one of the biggest things is that inability to create turnovers. Tom Coughlin said it in the press conference. I think his biggest point, the reason they didn't win the game, is because they didn't come away with any turnovers. Now, in the first game against Dallas, 0 sacks on the Cowboys. The second game against the Falcons, 2 sacks for the Giants defense. They're not getting consistent pressure on the opposing quarterback. And when you're not doing that, you're not going to come away with turnovers. That's half the battle right there because, look, for the most part, I even think you look in that game. The first quarter of that game, Julio Jones had 6 receptions for 44 yards. The defense makes the adjustments in the second quarter. They hold him to 2 catches for 7 yards in the second quarter. But then what happens at the end of the game? He goes off. That inconsistency, that inability to create pressure, that's huge for the Giants. It's a big reason why they're not finishing out these games.
And Joe, we look at the Giants, the defensive line too. It's not like back in the day, back in the late 2000s when you had Osi Umenyiora on that line, you had Justin Tuck, people that are very aggressive to getting to the quarterback. And that's been the biggest killer for them. And we're seeing now the absence of Jason Pierre-Paul. That injury is just killing them because he's the guy who gets to the quarterback. And without him, it's going to be a hard season ahead.
It really will, and I think Giants fans right now are just have so many things that they're being thrown at. Let's move on because it is a short week for the Giants, and I think that's the hardest thing is you have these first two heartbreakers, and now you got to turn right around and play a critical game against the Redskins on Thursday Night Football. And let's be honest, the Redskins kind of fooled us all and had a pretty nice win against the Rams this weekend. Right now, Rob, you got to make the pick. The Giants, their backs are up against the wall, 0-2. We all know what that means in terms of trying to get into playoffs. Who wins on Thursday night?
I mean, I'm going with the Giants, but I'm still uncertain at times because you never know what could happen. You never know, what mistakes are they going to make down the stretch. My only reason why I'm sticking with the Giants is because Kirk Cousins, I don't see him putting up a big yard game against the Giants whatsoever. He doesn't have Deshaun Jackson out there, and just he struggles going down the stretch for him.
You know, I think it's an interesting one, too. I am picking the Giants to win because I think in these Thursday night games, the road team is always at such a disadvantage. It's so difficult because just even from a physical standpoint, you can't recover your body in that short amount of time. You really can't. One of the biggest things that stuck out to me in the press when I talked to the players in the locker room after the games was Robert Ayers Jr. I mean, he was so adamant just that players hate the Thursday night game. I mean, we've heard it before, but I mean, hearing him in person talk about it and just watching the way that he expressed himself, you can't recover physically. Even Coach Coughlin said, we're not even going to have enough time to watch the film with the players. So it's a difficult. Those Thursday night games are crucial, and if you think about that, the disadvantage the home team is with that. Think about the road team. You've got to play on the road with all those other disadvantages, which makes sense when you look at the record. The home team is at an extreme advantage in the Thursday night football games. You're going with the Giants. I'm going with the Giants, you're going with the Jets, and I'm going with the Jets. In total agreement at the end of the first segment of our New York Giants weekly roundup. We will be back breaking down the rest of the NFL weekend. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.